Hi, Stitchers. Welcome to Tatreez Talk, where we share conversations about Palestinian embroidery. I'm Lena, here with my co-host Amani, chatting with talented embroiderers and artists, sharing their stories, inspirations, and the cultural significance behind their work.
On today's episode, we are going to be chatting with each other about the financial value of Tatreez. What does that mean exactly? So, we really want to talk about the issues surrounding paying people appropriately for their work, whether that's taking Tatreez classes or purchasing handmade thobes or Tatreez art pieces. So, I know this could be potentially a controversial topic. And so, I guess disclaimer, these are our opinions. Take it or leave it, whatevs is banik ben Allah. But yeah, these are our opinions. So we're gonna say what we're gonna say. Do you have a disclaimer, Lena? Are you good with that one?
I think that's good. I think that's good. Let's have that one cover me too.
Okay, love that. Love that. Okay, so let's start really by talking about really the importance of valuing Tetris. I think like you and I both together on this podcast and individually through the different work that we do, we talk a lot about that. And it's something that is really worth revisiting to start this conversation, and really discussing why it is important, both from a historical perspective, as well as kind of like talking about present day. And I know we were talking a little bit about that before we started recording about kind of the historical context around paying appropriately for handmade Tatreez work.
Yeah, totally. And I know that a lot of our guests will say it's come up several times in the episodes about how like once you get started, you get it. Like once you start practicing and you see how much time goes into your own personal practice, you're like, I would never sell this. I would never bargain with someone who's selling their own handmade tatreez. So 100% agree. And I'll say that I say this in like all my different classes, and I personally believe it really comes down to who tatreez was originally meant to be for. And so I always say in my classes, before 1948, Tatreez was culturally, like from a heritage perspective, done by a woman for herself. It wasn't meant to
Hmm.
be capitalized or commoditized or whatever word we want to use for this. And so because Palestinians have gone through occupation and apartheid and now genocide, this item has become commodified. And so for me, like that's where it kind of like lies. That's the core of the issue, is that it's no longer something that we Palestinian women do for ourselves. A lot of it is being sold for other people. And then, we always talk about as well. I don't know how you teach your classes, Amani. Actually, I'd actually be so curious to take one of your classes. I'm curious to hear
Oh, okay. We'll talk
your
about it.
historical. Yeah. But I always talk about how like one of the biggest ruptures obviously is 1948. And what we saw in research, done by several people now in the industry, is after 1948, women had to turn to their tatreez as a form of income. And so that
Hmm.
again, that commodification of the item, turned it, but it wasn't even just commodification. It was like a thing for survival. Um,
Yes. Yeah,
yeah.
and I feel like oftentimes they were and continue, unfortunately, to sell these handmade pieces for probably a lot less than they're actually worth because they really needed it for financial survival. I think it was our first, no, our second episode, our first guest, when we had Sada from Dira on. We talked a bit about the value of Tatreez with her as well. And she makes an effort with her company to offer, affordable items through machine embroidery, but also making sure that the handwork that she is selling for a price that's appropriate, that the actual people who are stitching it are receiving not just like a living wage, but like a thriving wage and
Yeah.
actually being paid appropriately, which unfortunately a lot of women, especially in Palestine and throughout the the diaspora in the Arab world specifically have been taken advantage of, even by these quote unquote nonprofits. And again, like, if you go back and listen to that episode with Sada, I think she was talking about one of her embroiderers who did not originally want her daughter to learn Tatreez because she saw it as, this isn't something that she can thrive in. It's something that I'm doing to survive.
Mhm.
And so it's really interesting to see how that has been looked at. And again, I think it's because of the way that these has been unfortunately devalued. But it is, I think, nice to see the shift today with many Tatreez artists in different forms who are trying to emphasize the value of Tatreez once again, because, it is an art form. And it is very labor intensive, as are most handmade anything really, whether we're talking about clothing or, uh, leather goods, anything like that. Anything that is handmade is very labor intensive. And you can see the work just by looking at it. You can see the amount of effort that is done. So I think that one of the things that we both emphasize as well is, as you kind of hinted earlier, when you actually do Tatreez, you really, really begin to understand how labor intensive it can be. So maybe this is a good reminder for everyone. Pick up a needle and thread. And if you haven't started yet, it's a good moment to start learning how to Tatreez. And you can start understanding a little bit more.
And honestly, it's not even just, we obviously both want everyone to be practicing Tatreez, but even if it's not your cup of tea, like I think just as, especially if you're Palestinian in the diaspora and someone who has Tatreez in their home, or you buy a handmade thobe or even a machine-made thobe, if you have Tatreez around, it's good for you to get familiar with the process. I think that's a valuable skill just to be familiarize yourself with what goes into actually making this piece. You don't have to make a whole thobe. We can talk about that if you want to, but you don't need to make a whole thobe to learn very quickly, like you said, how labor intensive it is, how much time it requires, focus, energy, even the materials that goes into it. It adds up. It's actually quite a
Mhm.
bit there. And so taking a class or having a little bit of, experience with the needle and thread just to see what it takes to do one Bethlehem moon, and then imagine how many hours would go into all the Bethlehem moons that make up a thobe, for example, is good. It'll make you think twice when the next time you're purchasing. It'll also make you better at finding the types of Tatreez pieces that you like and that you want. Um, should we talk a little bit about the breakdown of costs, maybe
I
involved
was, yeah, I was actually going to say because I know you mentioned you don't need to necessarily make a thobe to understand, but obviously you have made your thobe, and I think that is probably a prime example because probably the number one thing that people want to purchase, especially Palestinians, is a handmade thobe. So, Lena, I want to ask you if you could share with the class. Um, can you talk a little bit about like the stats? Like how long did it take you to make your thobe? How many hours went into it? How many stitches went into it? Like let's break it down for the listeners.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I obviously was very excited to put those numbers together when I finished it. So according to my Instagram, because my Instagram all started to document the journey of my thobe. So the first post that I made was October 11th, 2020, which is wow, imagine October in 2020.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I finished it on September 4th, 2022. So this is about just under 2 years worth of work. Now, obviously, I had a full-time job, and I was doing this, after hours or during hours at the time. Thank you, COVID, for at-home work. But nonetheless, it was comprised of about, should I do it panel by panel or just a total?
Ooh, why don't you give us the total first and then break it down by panel?
Okay. So the total number of stitches was 70,362 stitches.
Wow.
Um, which is wild. The one that had the most was the front panel that had 23,850 stitches, followed by the sleeves. If you count them as both sleeves together, it was about 22,714 stitches. Then it was the ebbe with 13,602 stitches. And then the back panel had 10,196 stitches. Um, so,
Wow, 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 wow.
so
Did
imagine
you track your
70,000 stitches.
hours by
Okay,
chance?
no, but the
Okay.
way that I did calculate just a rough estimate is I
Hmm.
did like an exercise where I just timed myself doing 100 stitches, and
Okay.
then I used whatever that time was to multiply or divide for the 70,000 stitches. So if we take that rate, that stitching rate that I
Mm.
timed myself on, it took me about 234 and a half hours
For one thobe.
for one thobe.
For one thobe.
234 sub. I don't know how many days is that? Divide that by 24. You're talking about
Let's see.
10, 10, 10 days, over 10 days straight, like nonstop of stitching,
For one
which
thobe.
for one
Let's
thobe.
remind people, one thobe,
Yeah.
200 plus hours, one person stitching it. That's, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So, when you find a handmade thobe for $150, we got to start asking why.
Like divide whatever thobe you're getting by about 200 hours to get an hourly rate. If it's $100 for this thobe, what is that? 50 cents an hour?
It's
That's insane.
yeah. Now, the exception to this rule, I'm thinking of back to Santa Fe and Mary's story. The exception to this rule is when you, as a Palestinian, are purchasing a thobe from a non-Palestinian, aka rescuing that handmade thobe and bringing it home, you negotiate the hell out of that. Because they did.
100%.
They did.
100%. And they didn't do the work. They just happen to have it
No.
in their store.
Yeah. So, do your thing, negotiate. Negotiate with those people. Don't negotiate with the tetas and the chazos.
Yeah. And then, okay, so this is the time, which is obviously the bulk of doing the thole, but there's also like the cost of materials is like people think
Hmm.
it's cheap stuff. It's not. If you're doing quality fabric and you're getting some saya like accents on that thole, I mean, I think I spent probably around $150 just on the fabric. And then obviously you have a sewing machine, all of the thread that's required. I have to do the math on how many like balls of thread I used, but
Hmm.
let's just assume 20 or so. That's another at least $40 on the thread. It's just it's a lot. There's a lot that people
Hmm.
don't really think about because they haven't gone through that process. And it makes it, it's just always like, oh, this seems so expensive. It's just a dress that I'm gonna wear once. But like, no, this was 200 hours of someone's time. Um,
Yeah. And like, to be fair, like completely understand everyone has different budgets. And that's why there's options of having machine embroidered thobes. And you know what? There's no shame in having a machine embroidered thobe.
totally.
And
Yeah.
there are very beautiful machine embroidered thobes. I know you recently got a
Hmm.
machine embroidered dress, right? From
Yeah.
Dira.
Yeah.
And I have a couple really beautifully done machine embroidered thobes where I literally there's one that I thought when I got it, I was like, wait, is this handmade? Like
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense for the price. Like I kind of freaked out a little bit. I was like, this is insane. It was really good machine embroidered though. But yeah, there's definitely like options for people, but the point being, when you are getting something that's handmade, whether you're doing it yourself or you're purchasing it, understand the work that really goes into that, the labor that goes into that work, and that should be reflected in the price of the garment.
100%, 100%. And the only other thing that I'll say is, you know, Tatreez, you mentioned it a little bit earlier in the intro, but Tatreez is art. So by
Mhm.
us putting the price down or devaluing our art, we're devaluing Palestinian art and a part of our
Mhm.
heritage and culture. And, for all of us who are like, coming out of the woodwork supporting Palestine, you need to value all parts of Palestine. That includes the work that is that is beautiful and that has meaning and is connected to the land and our history and the stories that that we can share from generation to generation. Like these are all parts of how we need to think about valuing any piece of Tatreez. So I think that's also something else to like think a little bit more about when you do go and buy or, decide to take on the practice as well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And again, to your point too, we encourage you to learn Tatreez and, pick it up and do it yourself. And look, not everyone, although I'm sure Lena, you would love for everyone to stitch their own thobe. Not everyone is going to stitch their
Yeah.
own thobe, and that's totally okay. Like you stitch what makes you happy, but even if you like pick it up and, it doesn't really click for you, that's totally fine.
Hmm.
But we encourage you to try it, and definitely like at least learn the history. Like, take a class if you can. There's opportunities to take classes virtually. There's so many more opportunities to take classes in person as well. I will say if you are going to take a class, Lena sees my face, that's why she's laughing. If you are going to take a class, make sure you're taking a class taught by a Palestinian, because non-Palestinians should not be profiting off of Tatreez, including teaching classes. Take a class from a Palestinian. If you need help finding a class, reach out. There are virtual options, there are IRL options. It really just depends on how you learn. I personally started with like free YouTube videos from our girl Roba, that are still on YouTube. And that's where I started. And then when I had the opportunity, I started taking classes. And guess what? I still take classes when I can, because I enjoy learning through kind of collaboration and doing. So of course, everyone learns in different ways, but there's plenty of opportunity to learn. And I think also to kind of what we're talking about as well, kind of the financial value of Tatreez, there are different opportunities depending on, what makes financial sense for you. Like I just said, I started watching free YouTube videos that Ruba still has on YouTube that you can very easily watch. I have some YouTube videos as well. There are classes to pay for virtually. There are classes to pay for in person. So there are many, many different options out there.
But I think we should also talk about, in terms of valuation, how are we paying our educators
Hmm.
appropriately for their time and energy? And I, listen, this is going to be a hot take, but I am kind of sick and tired of hearing someone come to me to give a Tatreez class for a fundraiser. And while I get it, this is the time, there are people like myself who are doing this full time now. And so this isn't something that we're trying to just give away for free. And it shouldn't be. This should be something that we as a community value, it's not just because you're raising money for Gaza, it's because you believe that our art is worth learning and is worth spending time and spending money in acquiring that knowledge and hearing the history as well. This isn't just about learning the technique. The Tatreez is so tied to our history, to our people, to the land, like I mentioned. And there should be a value against that. And I get it, but also it's like it shouldn't just be a fundraiser. Tatreez should be
Yeah.
something that you value learning as well.
Yeah, and I think also, I don't think it's honestly, I don't think what you're saying should be necessarily a hot take. I think it should be a plain fact, because there are a lot of us, I think I don't want to misquote who said it, so I'm not going to say it. To say who I think said it, because I don't remember if it was exactly this person, but a Palestinian kind of artist, a creator said that, they're also kind of exhausted of the expectation to constantly do fundraisers
Mm,
because of the fact that like this is what they do full time. And so many of us being Palestinian, we donate our own money and constantly have October 7th and
yeah.
have done for many years come and, all of that. So it is really tiresome expecting to constantly have um, the labor go to fundraising when we're Palestinian. Like, we're doing our own. I think the other thing too to emphasize is there's a big difference between like hanging out with friends and showing you how to stitch um, versus the labor that it takes to put together a 2-hour workshop.
Mm,
Um, so there's that. I think people also need to remember if you're doing a workshop that's being held at any kind of space, you're paying for the space. It's not free. There's that. And to your point too, like, we shouldn't devalue the work of any type of artist or any type of educator. There are so many. I'm somebody who loves taking different types of art classes. We know this. I've mentioned this before. I'll take all kinds of stuff, even when I'm bad at it. And I don't bat an eye about the prices. Well, I shouldn't say it like that because like there's definitely stuff that I'm like, ooh, I want to do that, but it's a little cost prohibitive now. I understand that that's out of my budget. I'm not like sitting there trying to negotiate with
exactly.
the
That's
educator.
the difference, right? That's
Yeah,
the difference. We have so many people, unfortunately, in our community who come up to us being like, why is the cost so high? Why isn't it not like I've seen this other class over there for $25. Why is yours like double, triple, quadruple the price? And like I would never have had the courage to do that to anybody, Palestinian or not. Like I would never think about, going to a pottery class and being like, why is that $85 or $120 for your like 2-hour pottery class? Like, shouldn't it be 50? Like I've seen it somewhere else for cheaper. Like if you've seen it somewhere else for cheaper, go to the cheaper class, if you really want
exactly.
to. But, the person who's offering the class is the one, the one who's best suited in that moment to price it. It's their right to price it however they want.
Yes,
So
exactly.
and I feel like this is a problem within our community specifically, unfortunately, but I don't
It
know.
goes back to the devaluation of art. Like there's no is art. Like it is an art form and there needs to be more appreciation for that. And I guess, again, I'll say there needs to be more value in it. It
Hmm.
is handmade work. It is a lot of work. It is not, an easy just snap my fingers and it's done type of art form. So it does take, effort to create. And that's something that I think we need to be reminded of because people have been unfortunately for so long used to paying $25 for a pillowcase that they should have paid a lot more for.
Yeah.
And it's reshaping that view of Tatreez within our community. And I think another thing too, again, like emphasizing the fact that like I completely understand everyone has different budgets. And for somebody, like taking a $65 class might be a lot of money, and that's completely fair. And there's no
Yeah.
shame in that. Again, there are different resources. Like I have taught classes that I got paid, but were completely free to attendees. Your local library, wow, I didn't pronounce that correctly. Library, y'all, I'm jet lagged, so but you can, if you want to learn Tatreez, go to your local library because one of the local libraries here in the Bay Area reached out to me earlier this year, and I taught a class where, it was completely free for the attendees. The library has a budget. I have done classes for companies, like Pixar, for example, like they took care of me. Their
Hmm.
employees
Exactly.
got to enjoy the classes for free. Here in the Bay Area, I did a class not that long ago for the San Francisco Art Commission. Again, it was free for attendees where there was a budget to pay the educator. So there are different options. Like if you want to learn Tatreez, you can also advocate for, your fellow Palestinian artists and
Mm,
like give them some support so that they can get make this a full full-time job. Like, our girl Lena's trying to make this full-time, y'all. So let's
Help me
support.
out. Yeah, exactly.
Help her
Exactly.
out so she has to go back to corporate America.
Please. Oh my goodness. But also the other model I just wanted to also point out, because I had that experience as well, is there can be like a partnership where, for example, the tickets are maybe $25 or $20, but the organization that's hosting you is paying the remainder of like what would be a more appropriate price for the teacher. So if you are from an organization and you want to bring Tatreez, there are ways to make it happen and still pay the educator appropriately for their time and their knowledge. So I highly recommend just like exploring that a little bit. Let's get creative. Let's, use our brains a bit and get crafty here, because there's no need for us to devalue the teaching of this art form either.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that you and I, especially because we do teach classes, we could probably talk about it till we're blue in the face. But it is important to remind ourselves, and again, to emphasize like, oof, if you have not already picked up a needle and thread, once you
Yes.
do, you will understand so much
Mm-hmm.
more.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
100%.
and I think also too, taking in which you referenced a little bit, but like the value from a cultural preservation perspective,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, supporting Palestinian artists teaching Tatreez allows Tatreez to grow, allows Tatreez to begin having a mark. We often talk about the lack of written history in our culture, that has been lost, I should say, maybe not the lack of, but the written history that has been lost. And so much of it has been oral history. So being able to preserve this art through education as well, and through passing that knowledge to both Palestinians and non-Palestinians. Like, I've had plenty of non-Palestinians take our class. And of course, if you're going to practice our art, it's probably useful for you to understand the history and have that knowledge as well, so that you could truly appreciate the culture.
And also, like, Tatreez is always the easiest talking point or like a
Mhm.
conversation starter. So if you are equipped with that information, it makes that conversation that you're going to have with your neighbor or the barista or whoever that much more powerful and have more meaning, and really move the needle um, from like a public standpoint on Palestine and our art, and where there's beauty past what people are seeing on their Instagram feeds and on the news. And like it's all connected. And I think the only other thing that I also wanted to point out as well, in terms of kind of tying this idea that Tatreez workshops are fundraisers, and this idea of bargaining with a woman who is selling her handmade Tatreez. Like, imagine if we had been paying these women appropriately for their time since 1948. Like, just imagine if they had been paid a wage that was livable since then, we wouldn't be having such a refugee crisis now. I mean, I think that's just my hypothesis. I can't prove it. But my hypothesis is that that would have been possible. And you see that because for us, like when we spoke with Sada from Dira, she has her use case where she was able to get a woman out of the refugee camp because she's been paying her appropriately for her work over time. Like, why hasn't that happened? Why are there still so many women who are in refugee camps? And everyone is just always constantly trying to, you know, fundraise for women, and like empower women in these refugee camps with opportunities to do Tatreez and pay them for their Tatreez. Like, if we had been paying them correctly from day one, I'm gonna stop because I can just go on and on, but it's just something to really think about and ponder on, because I really think it's the system that needs to be removed, I guess. But until then, we can make these small moves on our own in terms of how we think about the valuation of Tatreez.
Yeah, I'm blanking on the name of this organization, but there's a company, or it's a platform where, they talk about the fact that the best way to help people from a financial standpoint is actually not fundraising, but investing in their business,
Hmm.
investing in their local communities. And this platform is a global platform where you can, again, instead of donating, you are investing into someone's company. So you're not donating shoes, you're investing in a local business that is going to create shoes for the community or repair shoes for the community. So you're actually helping build their economy. And I think that's, an just kind of to what you were saying too, it's really about, giving these women, especially when we're talking about Palestinian women in Palestine and, in the diaspora who are selling handmade work, whether it's individually or through companies like Dira, making sure that, they are being paid appropriate because it is a financial freedom for them and that is
Mm.
independence for them in so many different ways. So I think, forget about us, pay them fairly the
Yeah,
most.
yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like it's I think that's the emphasis, is really like understanding the value and understanding why things are priced the way they are priced. And what the dangers of devaluing this art really mean. For some people it means not being able to pay their bills, and for others it can mean, as intense also as like an erasure of this culture, like as we heard with somebody not wanting to pass the skill down to her daughter.
Hmm.
So there are different ramifications to devaluation of Tatreez.
Yeah, yeah. So where do we go from here, Amani?
Well, I think we can talk a little bit, I think, to round out the conversation, talking a little bit about like what are strategies for like fair pricing, right? Like we talked a little bit about like what it looks like as far as like, from the numbers perspective, what it looks like to create a thobe, right? So how can people really determine what a quote unquote fair price is? How can they determine if they are purchasing something from a company that is paying their stitchers a fair wage? What are the strategies that you kind of use?
Well, that's a tricky question because a lot of it comes down to transparency. So, but I think the first step is actually being curious about it and going on these companies' websites, go on wherever it is that you're buying this tatreez from and see what they say about the work that they're doing and like look for those success metrics that aren't necessarily, how many pieces they've sold or how many designs they've made, but like how many women have left the refugee camp because of the work that they've been doing? Or, is this something that people are being paid item by item? Or are they getting a salary regardless of how much work is coming their way? Like these types of things, I think, are worth exploring on your own a little bit. And then obviously you can ask for references. You can ask friends and family and ask, have you bought from them before? Have you heard good things? What's their reputation around specifically how they value and how they pay appropriately? When you're looking at teachers, find out how much work do they do in preparation for their workshops. Like you don't want to just go and learn the technique. You can do that on YouTube, to be perfectly honest. You go to
Hmm.
the workshops to learn the history, to learn the
Hmm.
research, to learn why Tatreez matters. And that do a little bit of research there as well. I think it's, again, like you mentioned, there's something for everyone's budget. And it's just a matter of being curious and honoring that this is art, that this is something that is tied to cultural preservation, to heritage, to land, to history, and to stories. So taking that time to just do a little bit of research and understanding around who's around, and then share that with other people around you too. Those would be kind of where I would start. I don't know what comes to mind for
Yeah.
you.
I love what you said about transparency, because that I think would be my number one thing as well. I think that, even if you look outside of Tatreez, right, there are companies that work with different artisans from different cultures. And, you're always looking for the transparency and what those partnerships and what those relationships are like. So yes, agreed. Like the transparency 100%. And like just having those conversations, like there's nothing wrong with asking, you know, when it comes to that kind of stuff. And then I think when it comes to classes, like again, I completely agree with you, you know, like I said, I learned technique and I kind of learned, if we're being honest, like I learned basic technique through like YouTube videos, you know, even I have some free YouTube videos out there, like they're basic technique videos. You're not gonna like get the deep dive that you're gonna get in a 2 hour workshop. So I think it's like, you know, like it be realistic about like where you're at, and take the road that makes the most sense for you. How about that? I think, you know, I think that's the best way to approach it. And again, like it's okay to have conversations. Like, you know, if you don't know, like there's no shame in like asking. You know, be polite when you ask, you know. Don't come at people crazy. All right, hopefully I didn't piss anyone off. We'll
No,
see.
no, no. I think no, you're totally fine. I mean, if you did, then whatever.
Yeah, whatever. You know, I don't
Goodbye.
care. But you know, again, you know, we're always open to continuing this conversation. So like feel free to like reach out to us, like let us know what you think about all of this, whether you're in a position where you are an educator or you are an art of Tatreez artist, whether you're an admirer or purchaser of Tatreez, like whatever, wherever you fall in the spectrum. We'd always, of course, love having these conversations with you all. So reach out and let us know what you think. But we also have, before we wrap up completely of this episode, a little update for you all. So I think did we mention it like the top of the season or something? Maybe we mentioned it on social media. I forgot, but at some point we mentioned to you all that we're breaking down our episodes into seasons just to give ourselves a little break. And so this is our season 2 finale. So we are going to be taking a little break, which means that this is the perfect time for you all to catch up on previous episodes, re-listen to your favorite episodes, you know, send us loving emails about how obsessed you are with us. Like, thank you so
Or
much.
just share your favorite episodes with friends. And also, if you have guests that you really want to see on the podcast, send them our way. This is the time when we're going to be thinking about season 3, which is really exciting.
Yes. We're gonna take a little break. And then we'll be back in January. Lena, are you gonna do anything fun during the break?
Um, no, no,
Oh,
just
girl. Okay, we gotta fix that.
we're not, I'm no longer in that like timeline. I took a break in October, so my vacations are a little bit different these days.
Okay, well, I'm gonna be having a blast. I'm gonna have a jolly good time. All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening to Tatreez Talk. We, of course, want to hear about your Tatreez journey. So share your stories with us at tatreeztalk@gmail.com, and we might have you on an upcoming episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite listening platform, and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. You can follow me at me. Whoa, I'm like stuttering at the end. You can follow me at Min Amani and Lena at Lena's Thobe. And of course, follow the pod at the Threes Talk. We'll talk to you all in January.